So like Sarah mentioned, today we're going to be covering templates, which Sarah had mentioned at some point, like a term that you guys use is job masters. So I may use both. It's called templates in the platform, so I may use that mostly, but just going to give you guys a little bit of background there. Building those templates, building feeds, connecting them, and using production wizards. So those are kind of like the three core things that we're going to focus on today. I'm going to walk you guys through this entire process, but again, feel free to drop questions in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up and ask questions. I'm more than happy to tackle anything in the moment. So feel free to kind of stop me as you need it. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Back into your guys' account, Sarah mentioned this is the second training. If any of you guys missed that first training, we do have a recording of that. So I would highly recommend review that after the call today. All the fundamentals we covered in training number 1 are super, super important to what we're going to look at today. Definitely still stick around and watch what I'm going to go through you guys with today. Some really interesting stuff, but super important to know the stuff from training 1 to execute the things in training 2, what we're going to go over today. So we did a lot of the kind of basic building stuff last time, but today we're mostly going to be sticking in this little creative assets folder. So it kind of looks like a little bookcase icon up here in the top left-hand corner. I'm going to click into this, and you'll see creative assets is selected at the start when you first navigate to this. To start us out here, we're going to make a new folder. So this is a new template folder where your templates are going to live. And what I would recommend when you guys start building out these templates is that a template folder should be specific to a certain type of execution or a certain type of campaign, a certain look and feel, a certain animation should be segmented within these subfolders. If you end up putting a bunch of templates into one subfolder, one template folder, it can get a little bit confusing. So I'd just say that's kind of just a general recommendation. We'll just call this demo, maybe demo template folder. And then some of these things are optional, so you can add a thumbnail if you want to, you can add goals if you want to, and you can enter a description if you want to, but those are all optional. You don't have to put any of those in if you don't want to. I will add everybody just so that everybody can look at the work that I do today, but you know, obviously when you guys are doing this for real, you may just add Home Chef folks, you may just add Kroger folks to a particular template folder, so that it's visible to them and it's relevant to their needs and they're not looking at everything all the time. We'll click on next, and then we'll just call this demo templates. And then that's just going to make a subfolder. It's just going to make what looked like a campaign folder during the first session. And I'll just make sure we're looking at all folders here. And just let me run through that one more time. Everyone. In some cases, you will see like it's not showing up like it is here. For me, that's because I don't have all the brands selected. So when you guys are doing this by Home Chef or Kroger, whatever it may be, you may get the same sort of situation I am, where some things aren't showing up. In most cases, that's just because you're not selecting the different brands. So we'll just select all of these. I'll go into one of these, or I can even archive this one just to get that out of the way. And then I'll hop into this specific template folder. So once we're inside, this will look the same way as a campaign looks in the main account that we looked at last time, except now, instead of new creative, it says new template up here in the left-hand corner. So to start us out, that is what we'll do today. Click on new template. Select the product exactly the same way as we did last time. We were just building a single creative. I'll start a display creative here. I'll select animated banner. You do have the option to build all of these different types of products within the same folder. So we'll go over this a little bit more later, but in some situations, and for you guys, in most situations, probably you will have a single template folder that contains both animated HTML creatives and static creatives. If you have certain sizes that just need to be statics, both formats can live within the same template folder and can be generated all at once. Go into this animated banner. Again, we'll select a starter size, and then we'll just say demo. and we'll click finish. Once you've done this, this puts you into the same builder as we were looking at last time. So you'll build out your creative in the exact same way as you built it out last time. I would recommend, I've seen some folks where they get confusion between building creatives in the main account in a campaign versus building creatives inside of a template as templates. So I would say for you guys, in almost every case, it would make sense to just build stuff as a template from the very beginning, for nothing else than the fact that you guys are swapping out all those different logos, and a creative being a template from the very beginning means you can do that very easily rather than having to make a bunch of manual edits. So as opposed to the way we created the creatives last time, I would say in most, if not all of the cases, you'll start in creative assets, you'll make a template folder, and then you'll build the templates inside of that folder. So I'm going to skip over pretty much all of the actual production like we looked at last time, just because we covered that. And again, if you weren't present for that one, definitely review the recording. But this is kind of a good time to show copying of creatives and animations and assets and things like that from one piece to another. And so I have on another tab here, this is essentially the creative we made last time. It's in 6 sizes. I did copy this into your guys' account, so you can come in here whenever you want and kind of look into it and dissect it and see how it was built and everything. But like I mentioned, I want to show you guys really quickly just how you can copy and paste things from one creative to another to save yourself some time in that way. So for this one, I'm going to make some additional sizes. So last time, again, in that single animated banner, you weren't able to make additional sizes within the same unit, but within a template, you can do that. So for this, I'm going to just add my additional sizes really quickly. And I'll have 6 in total. So this one will be the 728 by 90. And 2 more, one of the 970 by 250, and the last one is the 320 by 50. Okay, so I'll save that. That's basically all the sizes that I'm going to be building in. And now we can show the process of copying and pasting. And again, what I would recommend is you guys just start off with the 6 blank sizes, or however many sizes you have for a particular type of creative, and then just build into these from the very beginning. But again, since we did the work last time, we'll just kind of copy these things over. So when you are copying a creative with animations, it's really important to remember that you can just select everything, just marquee select everything, copy and paste into this unit. But what happens when you do that is you don't get the animation. So we want to keep the animation because we did that work and we don't want it to be wasted. So I'll come over to here. And when I know I want to do that, copy the animation as well, select the scene that's inside this creative. So I'll just tap on this little intro tab. Now marquee select everything, Command C, hop into this other one, make a scene for the animation to paste into. So I'll just call this one intro as well. And then Command Shift V, and it will paste in place and take over all the animations as well. So again, this is one of those things that I see people getting a little bit confused about if you're taking one thing from another and you want to maintain all those animations. So that's how you do it. We'll do this just really quickly for the rest of these sizes. Again, for this size, we'll just make sure the scene is selected, grab everything, come in here, make an animation, intro, paste. Same thing for the rest of these. And the reason I'm doing this at all is because I want to be able to take this creative and make a template out of it. There is another way, and this actually may be a good time to show this. Instead of doing all this copying and pasting, I can also just take this entire creative, this entire creative, and copy it into this folder. So since this one is a template to begin with, this is fairly easy. And you can even do this with, if you accidentally built a creative as an animated banner in the normal account, you can really easily just copy this into a template folder, and then it will be a template, and you can templatize it in the way that I'm going to show you guys today. So let's imagine this is just a normal creative in the campaign. You can click on this little checkbox here. I'm just going to make sure that I know what I named this one. So we'll just say, let's call it new demo templates. So now I can click Actions, Copy, and then we'll just search New Demo Templates. copy it over to there. And now I can hop back into this template folder, and I have the one that I just was working on a second ago in the other folder. Or if it was a normal campaign, now it's a template. So I'll archive this one I was copying into, and then I'll hop into this one that's completely finished, so I don't have to keep going back and forth and copying and pasting everything over. But it's good to show that just because sometimes you will need that. And now I can start kind of walking you guys through the creative that was built as a set of 6 sizes. How do we make that prepared to be a template that can be reused and adjusted with Production Wizard? So you'll notice that this is designed, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with designing things as they look right now. Like this is using a particular background image, it's using a particular logo, it's using a particular set of text, so on and so on. When you're building templates in general, you really want to think about all the other potential content that may be used in this creative and how that will flex things, adjust things, or change things. Excuse me, just give me some water. Okay, so a couple of really key things in that consideration are images and text. Like those are probably the 2 biggest things you're going to have to think about when you're taking something that was conceived as just a normal creative and making it into a template. Background images, almost always, there are some cases where this will not be the case, but almost always you want to set these to crop. And you want to think about how the images are going to behave with the animations that are used in each of the sizes. So what I mean by that is, if I come into the animation and click the spacebar, at the end, so the end frame of this creative, really the only space that I have to be my focal area is like, this area right here. So I could put a shape here and say roughly this spot right here, that's where my focal area is, and maybe a little bit smaller. So when you're preparing your assets, it's a good idea to think about all of your assets with the different Krojis and the different background material within that same asset. The focal area should be in this rough area, right? And so when you're prepping your assets to be used in this template, you want to make sure that the focal area is kind of lined up more or less with the subject here, the kitten floaty here in the pool. That's important because when you plug in your content into this template in Production Wizard, all the animations will line up and the focal areas will be, intentional with the space here, and the creative will look good. Same kind of thing with logos, but a little bit different is that logos almost always, and I would even go as far to say is you should always set logos to fit, because if you set these to crop, you'll end up getting things like this where they're getting cut off or whatever it may be. And again, when you're making a template, you don't want to think about the creative using the Ralph's logo. You want to think about it using the Kroger logo. You want to think about it using the City Market logo. You want to think about all the other logos that you're going to be using in this creative. And to go along with that, this was built to be specifically cropped for this particular logo. It's kind of like a more landscape logo, but you want to also think about things like, I don't know, a little bit taller logo, right? So if I make this a little bit bigger and still center with the CTA here, I can go into the source assets here and just kind of change out a couple of the different logos just to kind of see how they fit in this space to make sure that it's ready to go, basically. So if I do the QFC, is that tall enough before where it was like, a little bit more narrow? It might not be big enough, so you want to make sure that it's both tall enough and wide enough to accommodate all the different logos you want to use in the creative. Another consideration is the CTA text. So how wide it is. Are you going to be changing the CTA later? If not, you don't really have to worry about it. But if you are, then make sure that this bounding box is at least a little bit wider than the text that's being used in the actual creative right now. So if I zoom in on this, you guys can see, if I had built it just with the shop now in mind, I may have the text box, much more narrow, and that if I do, I don't know, or faster, I think was one of the other ones. It may end up getting shrunk more than I want it to be, and it may end up looking kind of strange. So when you set up your creative with the CTA in mind, and you know that it's going to be changing down the line, my rule of thumb for CTA text is like 80% of the button, just so that is a little bit bigger and it can accommodate a longer string of text, but it's not so big that it's going to maybe potentially start bleeding into the edge of the shape, and again, looking kind of strange. So that's for that one. And for both of these text areas, so the headline and the CTA, you almost always want to have shrink to fit turned on, so that regardless of what somebody's putting in there later on, it will kind of start shrinking when it gets to the edge of that bounding box. And then now I can click into my group with the headline, and I have pretty much the same thing. So I have these all set to shrink to fit, and they're longer. They're actually 100% of the group, or almost 100% of the group. And all these have shrink text to fit on as well. So if somebody puts in, quick pickup, it will not shrink, and it will be in line with where the free was, for example.
Hey, I have a quick question for you from the chats. For images, can you set the alignment for the image in the container? So horizontal left, vertical center.
For sure. You can. So there's this little grid down here, this little positioning grid. This will align, and it's not going to really show too much. I'll make this image a little bit smaller so it's a little bit more obvious. But you can snap it to any corner of the original image. So if the edges down here aren't going to actually show, but if you snap it to the right or center or left, it will snap it to the original asset that's inside of that box. But keep in mind that this will be applied to all of the images that you put into this template. So you can't say, for example, I want to put the image of the mom with the 4 or 6 arms or whatever it is, and I want to have her aligned to the left side of the bounding box, and I want to have the kid in the pool aligned to the right side of the bounding box. They all have to share the same alignment from the template. So it's kind of just important to keep that in mind so you don't end up designing a particular creative with that as a rule, and then it gets to the end and it ends up looking a little bit strange. What I did for the examples today is for the baker in the kitchen and the mom version of the assets, I basically just exported some assets so that the focal area was in about the same area in all of them, and they had the same sort of original size, so they all animate in the same way, and they all end up looking the way that I want them to. One thing I actually noticed, and if I was a good call out for this, is that the image of the baker you guys had in the assets that you sent over. I think you guys obviously have much more availability of assets than we do, but the background was split out in some of them, in some of the assets, was split out from the actual PNG subject that went on top. So those obviously way more versatile. You can create an image that's going to work in these templates a lot more easily when you have the subject split off from the background, and then you can kind of adjust things as needed so that they end up working. But absolutely, you can kind of adjust things this way so that they're sort of snapped to a corner of an image within the bounding box that exists in the creative. Okay, so we covered the headline. So these all shrink to fit, and they're all a little bit longer than the actual text that we're using, just to kind of keep in mind that we may be changing those things down the line. For this example, in the kind of the mocks that we had, they all said free pickup, so we don't even really even have to templatize this, but I do want to show you guys as just a quick example, because in one of these, the color of the text changes as well. So I wanted to show that. And then for this third text box, obviously, we have pretty much the rest of the group to play with. So you could put a much longer headline in that, and it would just keep going down, and it would not shrink. But it is still set to shrink to fit just in the event you have a really long third headline in there, and it needs to shrink for any reason. Okay, so that's kind of covering how you want to think about the content inside of the individual sizes in the template. So I've done that to all of these. They're essentially all the way that I want them to. The groups are all set up. They're all set to shrink to fit, so on and so on. The second thing you want to think about when you're building templates in general is the layer naming of your creative. So the way I have this one set up and the 160 by 600 is pretty typical of how you're going to see your layers be named when you're just dragging in components from the components panel, or when you're just dragging in assets that you brought in from your computer. You'll see things like text-E3, text-E3 copy. You end up seeing a lot of things with copy in the name, just because the way I work, I typically, when I have something that has the right font or whatever, I just copy paste and resize as needed. So you will see a lot of like, copy, copy one, copy three, so on and so on. Same thing for groups. This is not as important, the naming of the actual groups, but I like to kind of keep this stuff clean just to make it really, obvious if somebody comes into my template and they didn't originally build it. It's a little bit more egregious with like actual assets. So this asset is called Ralph's because it says Ralph's, and the background image, obviously background, holistic achiever, and then the size that it's supposed to go into. So I will kind of clean this up, and it's important to keep in mind when you're cleaning up the layer naming in a template that you're naming, excuse me, naming components, whether it's text, images, videos, whatever it may be, the same across all sizes that you want to be linked together. So for most of the case in this example, everything's going to be named the same across all the sizes with one difference, with one kind of exception to that rule. So I'll just rename this one headline. I'm going to name this first one headline 1A because essentially, like I'd say, this is the first headline. It's split into 2 rows, and then the bottom one here is the second headline. So I'll call this one headline 1E. And I'll just copy paste, and we'll call this one headline 2. And then Ralph's, I'm just going to call logo. So when you're building templates in general, you don't want anything to be specific to the type of content that it's actually shown in the creative. Because the whole idea is that when this is built, it's general and it can be plugged into and used however you want. So different logos, different background images, different copy, whatever. So that's why these things are as general as what it is on the screen, and that's pretty much it. We'll call this one CTA. This is just the group, and then inside the CTA, we'll say CTA text. We'll call this one CTA color. Because for some of them, as you guys know, for the Kroger ones, this becomes white, the text becomes blue, and the shape back here becomes blue as well. All right. For this last one, this is kind of like a color block that is used in all of these creatives, and this is actually a really good call out because it's there's an efficiency that can be brought up with this specifically. I'm going to call this one color blocks, plural. The reason I'm doing this is because this is what I named it in all of the creatives, even the ones with two color blocks, so that when I change this in the feed, it changes all of them rather than just changing like, color block on top, color block on bottom, or left or right, or whatever that may be. When you name one thing specifically with like colors, all the same across all the sizes, when you change it once, it changes it on everything that's using that same name. So that's a really good efficiency to use. So we're almost at the end here. I mentioned a second ago there's going to be one exception to the rule of naming everything the same, and that is the background image. Because for this specific set of creatives, I have a different image that's going to be cropped differently for each of the background images. And there is a way you can do this where you could use the exact same image for all of the different sizes, but you would just have to know that and keep it in mind from the very beginning so that, again, you could use one image that is big enough, both vertically and horizontally, to go into all the sizes, and that, the assets that I had available, I couldn't do that with those, so I'm just going to do an asset per size. So I'll just call this background 300 by 250. Okay. So that one's done, and then I'll just do the same kind of thing for this one. And then what I would say is typically, again, when I'm doing this, I usually just build the 300 by 250 and not even build any of the rest of these sizes. I build this one, set up the naming convention for the 300 by 250, and then copy everything into the other size, make my adjustments for sizing as needed, make my adjustments to animations as needed, and then I'm keeping all the naming conventions so I don't have to go back in here and edit them all one by one. That's a really kind of good trick to save yourself some time with that. I'll call that A, just to match the one we just did. Any questions at all so far? I know we're kind of going through this stuff quick, but feel free to speak up. CTA text here, and then CTA color. And then again, since I have two of the shapes here, I'll call this color blocks. and I'll call the other one the same thing, color blocks. And this one will just say background 160 by 600. Now I already did the naming convention for all these other ones, so you don't have to sit here and watch me do this manually. But same naming convention for all of them: headline 1A, headline 1B, headline 2, logo, so on and so on. And now we go through the process of actually making each of these elements part of the template. So with this example I'm going to show you guys today, I'm pretty much going to templatize everything. I am going to templatize everything. But for you guys as the designers, you have full ability to templatize as much or as little as you want to. So for example, you could, in theory, make one template that is the kid in the pool template. You could never intend to put another background image in this, and you just want to change the logo to be all those different logos. You could just go into the template panel, which is where all this happens. So click on here. And this is the real way that you can tell if something's a template versus just a normal creative in the campaign. You will have this template panel, and if you don't see this, you should click on the little tab up here to see if you can turn templates on or off. If this is not here, that means you are in a normal campaign and it's not a template, and you should copy it into the Creative Assets folder. But if it is, then you're in a template and you're good to go. So if that was the case and you just only wanted to ever change the logo, you could just click on the logo asset, click on Add to Template, and you would be done. And so you'll see when I'm doing this, when I'm clicking on Add to Template, I get this little chain and 6 next to it, and that's just letting me know that all 6 of my creatives are now linked with the logo, and it's good to go. If I change it across one, it changes it across all of them. When you're getting new to this and you're kind of getting familiar with setting all your naming convention to be same across all of them, you'll probably run into some situations where you have, like, I don't know, a space after this or something, and it breaks it from the others. But just kind of keep in mind how many sizes you have and how many should be linked together when you templatize a certain element. So this, I'll just... so you could just do this, that could be it, and you could just want to change out the logos, but for my example, I want to kind of go all the way and templatize everything. So I'll do this for all of my attributes here. Click on Add to Template. Again, everything that's sharing that same name will be linked together. And then with text, you'll notice that you have some additional options as opposed to images. So images is just the image asset that it's using. For text, you have the ability to turn on or off both the text that it's using, so the actual copy that it's populating the box with, as well as the font and the color. So these you can turn off. So for example, if I don't want somebody to be able to change this from the Quicksand font that it's using to anything else, I can just turn font off, and then it's completely inaccessible after the fact and nobody can mess with it. So I'll do that on all these because I don't expect for anybody to be changing that later. Color we do want to change because, again, as I mentioned earlier, some of these have different colors, especially with the CTA. And then I'll just keep going down the line here. So CTA text, we'll add that to template. The color for the background in the CTA, we'll add to template. Again, just color there. Color block here, add to template. And so there are some of these, like CTA text. This only has 5, so that makes me think I'm probably missing one of them. So, and the reason that is because in the 320 by 50, I don't have a CTA. So that's the only reason that's happening. Go back into this original one. Color blocks, I have 10. There are 2 in some of them. There are 1 in some of them. And then for the background image, I'll add this to template. So I notice that with this, because this has a different name than all the other background images, it's not linked to anything because it's a specific background image for this particular size. So don't be kind of afraid if you see that. It's just because of the way we named it. We are doing this intentionally so that each size gets its own background image. So really the only thing I have to do with the rest of these is just add the background image, because that's the only thing that's different. Everything else is linked. So I'll do this on a few of the rest of these. And then the only major difference between this last size and all the others is the fact that it has a different asset. The 320 by 50 has this little arrow, whereas the rest of them don't have that. So this one, I will do the background image, and I will do the arrow. And it's called arrow color because, again, this changes between Kroger and the rest of the brands. Click Add to Template there. So now these are all set up. this is pretty much finished. I can click save. I can click preview. When I do click preview, this will put me into kind of like a simulated production wizard, which we'll look at in a second. So you can kind of test this out, see how it works. If you have a different type of background image or different type of copy, you can kind of test it out in here and just make sure that it works. So I can maybe swap out my logo here. We'll do the Fred Meyer logo. See how that looks. Is that too small? Do I want the container to be a little bit wider so that it can accommodate these wider logos or not? Totally up to you guys. And now when you change it on one of these, again, this is kind of the magic of this. Once you've spent your time setting up your template, you change it on one of them, it changes it on all of them. So now these all have the Fred Meyer logo. And what I would do and recommend to you guys is go into preview, just kind of play around, use different assets, use different background images, whatever it may be, and just sort of see how they look, and then make your adjustments to your template accordingly to get the look you're going for. In addition to that, now you can come in and kind of test out things like a different CTA. So I think a different one of the CTAs was, let me see, you could do order faster. And again, this will shrink to be inside that box, and then it will change on all the different sizes in the creative. And you may say things like this. This just may not be set to shrink to fit. This is one of the sort of reasons why you want to come in here and test out, so that if something like that happens, you can come back in here and go to 160 by 600. Make sure this has shrink text to fit on. It does not. So I'll save that. And then if we go back into preview, this will kind of do what I expect it to. So now it says order faster, doesn't get split into 2 lines. Really important to do this testing so you can kind of suss out the edits that need to be made to make your template super rock solid, and be expectant of any different type of content that you're going to put into here. So we can say this is good, happy with this, everything looks pretty much correct. You can even, and I would recommend using different background images just to kind of see how they get cropped with the animation and everything. I'll find one of my other assets here. So this is the 160 by 600. I'll throw on this one and just kind of see how it gets cropped. That looks pretty good. You can replay this so the animation plays again. And you can see how that looks. And then once you're happy with everything, once it looks good with different types of content and everything, then at this point, you can move on to building out the feed. So that's kind of the point that we will move on to next. Any questions about setting up the templates or using that production wizard view? We'll get into that a little bit more later, but any questions about anything we've covered so far?
You're making them all masters, Ukiah.
Yeah, you guys
blown
are
away.
Super clear. I'll take the silence as you guys understand everything about this. Okay, so now moving on to the feeds. To start us off there, you will notice that within the template folder, you have creatives and you have data. So creatives is where you build out the templates, and data is where you build out the feeds. Pretty simple. So tab over to your data tab, click on new feed here, and we'll call this maybe a Kroger feed. Start building, and then this will put you into what we call the feed editor in Celtra. So it's fairly similar to something like Google Sheets or Excel or something like that, but with the very key difference that this is purpose built for making feeds. So instead of it being something like a Google Sheets or something like that where you're just inputting data and it's kind of removed from the product that's going to be connected to, this is very much intentionally built so that it interacts with the creatives that you're going to have them interact with. So you have a couple of tabs up here, and we'll start with this label. So I'm just going to say, I'll just have a generic label for this. There are a bunch of options here. You can say country, language, custom label, whatever it may be. Essentially, this is just the naming convention that can be tacked on to each individual creative so you can tell the difference between them. So something like Holistic Achiever with Fred Meyer or something like that. So when you look at the line item in the end campaign, you can tell the difference between the light and the load version that has the QFC logo versus the Holistic Achiever that has the Kroger logo, for example, without clicking into it and all that. And then from here, we're going to just start setting up the feed. So the way that this works for my example today is that I essentially will have a feed column for each of those attributes within the creative. And I'll build this out with you guys right now so you can kind of see the process. But essentially, a creative, a template, and a feed are always going to have some parity between the types of content that you are exposing as variables, so like background, image, headline, whatever it may be, and the feed columns that are being set up in the feed editor. So to start us out, we'll do value. We'll say this one is called headline 1, A, and we'll say this is text. So it basically asks you what type of content this is, whether it's a color, a landing page, an image, whatever it may be. This is text. I'll do headline 1, A, underscore color. So this is super important and a huge efficiency actually. When you name something the same name as the attribute or the component in the creative, and then append this little addition, this little suffix underscore color, you can say now it's a color, and when I go to link them later, it will automatically link to that component. So if I just did, headline 1 space color, I would have to manually link this column to that attribute from the creative. And I'm saying a lot of wild, crazy stuff, I'm sure, and this will all make sense in a few minutes when we look at it in Production Wizard. But this is super useful, so I would kind of take note of this. If you want it to be associated with that component, make sure you add this little suffix to the name and make sure that it's color. You can also do this with font, so you can say headline 1A font. If you wanted a particular version to have a different font than all the others, you can do that this way. But for this, we're just going to stick with color. So I'll say that. Say headline 1B. That's text. I'll say headline 1B. Underscore color. And say color. Headline 2. That's text. This one will be logo. That's an image. Make sure you select that it's an image. And when you get an image, or when you say that a particular column is an image, you get this drop down, which we'll take a look at in a few minutes here. This one will say CTA text. That is text. Next one will be underscore color. That is a color. And then this one will also have CTA color, which is, this is the background for the CTA, the little pill shape. This one is a color. And so, I mean, maybe I didn't do the best job of my naming here, but like, this is why naming is so important. So it's really clear to somebody if CTA color, does that mean the shape? Does that mean the text? I mean, probably for this case, it would have been better to have it be like CTA background color, CTA shape color, or something like that, just so that it's super, super clear for whoever's using Production Wizard later. This next one we'll do color blocks. That's a color. And then we'll start doing our background images. So background. I'll just copy this one. I'll say that this is an image. And then do it for the rest of the 5 sizes. So this one will be 2 by 600. Image. This one will be 300 by 600. Image. Do I have 728 by 90? 970 by 250. Image. And the last one is the 320 by 50. And before I forget, the last attribute that I'm going to add as a column in here is going to be the arrow color, because that is used in that 20 by 50, and that is an image. Click apply. And then that is essentially our schema for the entire feed. So this is the spreadsheet that's going to handle every single version for every single permutation that we're going to make for that particular template. So starting us out here, I'll just start constructing these. And the way that you want to think about this is that each row here is a creative or a group of creatives. And the only reason I say group of creatives here is because we have the different background images as specific columns for each of the variants. So yeah.
Sorry, a couple questions that I think might be helpful to get out of the way now. We have a couple questions on how to essentially set up a base feed for all the columns so you don't have to set it up again on every project or job in the future that would require similar data. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. That is exactly what I would do for something like this. So you can, at any point, you can just download this. This will download this as a CSV file. And then you guys can share it internally on, what I think you guys use Dropbox or something like that. You guys can then use that as often as you want for any other project. I would say something to keep in mind is that not every template is going to share this same schema, but I think you guys kind of get the idea with that. And then when you need to make a new feed in a different template folder, you can click this little import button, drag and drop that CSV in, and then it will use the same schema. So you don't have to set it up the same anew every single time. You can just kind of make that base template, base feed template, download it, share it amongst the team, and then import it into any other feed editor or template campaign that you're building out.
Awesome.
Is there any other questions, Jackie, or is that it?
That was it, but that was a popular one. If you guys have any other follow-ups, feel free to unmute, or if you prefer, throw it in the chat, and I'll just politely interrupt you, Kaya.
And what I would say, honestly, is you guys are going to know your workflow better than me, obviously. And so you could just have a feed that is just logos. And so it's, 11 or however many logos long, and you just use that for creatives that you just want to change the logo out on. Maybe it's not something as complex as I'm doing right now, and you just need to make a quick change and get a dozen creatives out of a single template. You just have a single line in here, have all the logos connected to a template, and you're done. So that'd be a good example of that. Or something like, I don't know, CTA and logo. It can kind of be whatever you want for that. So for this, I'll kind of start listing out my rows. So I'll say holistic achiever. Let's actually start with Ralph's for this. And so that's my label for the row. Headline for this, I'm going to cheat off screen a little bit and look at my notes. This one is going to be the same as the one we looked at in the actual the template itself. So this will be free. This is headline 1A, remember. It's not the entire headline for the beginning. It's a free pickup. And the second one will be relax. You got it. We'll do these colors in a second here. Logo will be, got to put my images in here, so we'll get, I'm just going to drag in all these images into the feed. So when you do that, when you get all your, I know you guys can't see this, but it's just the background images and the logos essentially. When you drag in images and videos, this applies to videos, they will become available to you within these image drop-down menus. So this one, this is the logo, so we'll just find the Ralph's logo, or you can type in Ralph's, or whatever type of naming convention you guys are using for the assets. And then for CTA, we'll just use, I think this one had Shop Now. And then we will do the images. So as well for these, you can just do HA, and then we'll pull up all the different sizes. This one is 250. I have a different name, let's say. do this as a different one, maybe. Do this like below. And I think this one had a different CTA, or I'm sorry, different headlines. We'll do while we're here, something important, you'll see these like little notes here. You can do intentional and forced line breaks for any of the text that you're entering in here, so you can control that from the feed side, not necessarily from the creative side. Very useful for things where you want to have maybe a specific couple of words, never break. So if you want to have like, I don't know, free pickup always together within a particular headline, you can say unbreakable line. So start unbreakable line, end unbreakable line. Just do control comma, control period, and we'll add. So if I wanted to do enough to juggle all together and never break, I could just do this. And it will add these kind of little bits of code, and then it will highlight it up here. So this will never break when it's in the creative. For this, I'm just going to let it do its thing, but it's super important to note that. Save real quick, and I'll keep filling out this. So that's my light and the load image.
All right, we have another question, Ukiah.
Yeah.
Susan, feel free to let me know if I am not saying, I'm going to say it word for word, but let me know, feel free to unmute if there's any other clarifications you want to provide. So it sounds like the team has different logos and they have different alignments of the logos for different sizes. So the question is how to handle that essentially. So does the image container for the logo be left aligned for the 300 by 250, but then center aligned for the rest of the sizes?
So, and yeah, feel free to speak up with this. Do you mean that in the 300 by 250, the logo is always over here, and then 160 by 600, it's always up here centered, or do you mean something different?
So left align for the 300 by 250, center align for 160 by 600, 300 by 600, 728 by 90. It's just because of the CTA being in the banner bar in that particular size.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, and feel free to correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but you would handle that just in the template. So for this one, you just put the logo box where the logo is intended to be. So for this one, you put it off to the left. These are all going to be centered. So the positioning within the grid here is always centered. So if you change this to be, I don't know, something like Dylan's, it will continue to always be centered. Same thing for the 300 by 600. This will always populate into the center of this box. It will never like deviate and be something like, you know, something like that. You'll never do this as long as you set the rules within the template. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's, I mean, the kind of the overarching thing to keep in mind when you're making templates is that a template is a set of rules. A template is never a final creative, really. I mean, it is because, you know, I'm using assets in here and I have copy and the CTA and it all looks like a final creative, but really you want to think about a template as a set of rules for assets. So if you want to make sure that that logo is always centered, make sure that the positioning is centered, which this is centered by default, but if for whatever reason you wanted it to be left aligned or whatever it may be, set of rules that you're going to then apply content to. So that's kind of just the way you want to think about it in general. Is there any other questions, or does that cover it? Okay, cool. Just keep following this out. And then for this one, since the color blocks for this is white, I'll use the blue arrow, and then we'll start addressing our colors here. So for this one, the headline one is going to be white. So that is F's. And then we can copy and paste cells really easily within Feed Editor, so you don't have to do that every single time. And then for our text color, this is the CTA. So it is a white block, blue shape, and white text. Get rid of that there. And then CTA color for this, I'll just get my hex code from off screen, paste that in here. And then for this one, in these ones, this is all white as well. So the color blocks for this particular one that's not Kroger is going to be all white as well. And then we'll save. And then since I don't want to just have to fill these out every single time, really the main difference for the other, I just have 11 of the logos. I'm not sure if there's more than that. But for the 11 different variants, really the main difference is just going to be the logo. So what I'm going to do is copy this entire row, go down to the 11, paste, and then I have all the same headlines, I have all the same CTAs, and then I can just change my logos. And then specifically for the Kroger one, so we'll do that one next, my Kroger white logo, I'll just flip-flop some of these colors. So for CTA text, this is actually going to be white, CTA color, sorry, CTA, this is going to be white, so I'm actually going to flip that, put that there, and put that there. So this is basically just obviously flip-flopping. And then for the color blocks, this will be, let me find the color blocks. I just took care of that. So the color blocks blue, text, the button itself, the shape is white, and then the text inside the button is blue. And then for this one specifically, I think we had some different coloring on the actual text, so I'll change that as well. So headline 1, I believe was a light. I want to say, you guys correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think this one was the lighter blue. And then the headline 1B is the darker blue. And then it looks like I'm actually missing the headline 2 color, so I'm actually going to add that to underscore color. That's a color. And then I'm going to grab this and just move it over so that it, where did that go? I think I just Command Z did away, so I'm going to do it again real quick. Okay, so we'll move this guy in place. Next to headline 2. And then we'll set this up for the other one as well. Move over. Right there. Okay. So this one we will do for the Ralphs and all the other versions. This one will actually be white. We'll just copy, paste all those in, and then for this one it's going to be I think the darker blue on this one actually. Okay. So that looks good, and then for the rest of these, I just want to change the logos, but I also want to change the labels on these, so I'll do that really quickly as well. Just going to bring in my assets here so I can look at them. So for each of these, you just kind of come into here. We'll do to fit my other logos, the QSC here. What am I missing? Yeah, Ralphs and Smiths.
I think you have 2 Ralphs.
2 Ralphs, I should do. That one out, put that one there, and delete this one. Okay, we'll save that, and then we'll just adjust the logos when we'll be done for this set of creatives. So this one, actually, I think that's the one I'm missing. I'm missing the Kroger one. So I'll take this row.
The main one.
That one's important, right? Okay, so now I have all 11. Cool. So now I'll just change the logos really quickly. So this one we'll just do, just search in here for all these different ones, and we'll just match them up to the label. All right, that one's all done. And now, since I've done pretty much all of the work in terms of like the coloration and the logos that I will use on the other variants, what I can do is select all of these, copy, and then just go out to what is I'm bad at math, so 22, paste all of these in, and then we should get them to be all carried over. So copy the entire row. Paste these in. So doing the second group is not quite as bad as doing the first. You can even just do, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, and then you'll obviously change some things. Like this will be, instead of it being line load, you'll do the next one being the Baker version. And so I save myself the time of having to, remap all of the labels to the logos and all that stuff. So I can just come in here, starting at row 12, and just start setting up the other images on these background images. So I'll do 300 by 250. Do this one. And then for these, we'll just copy that group into all of these cells, and we're done for that. And then we'll just change for the label, we'll just do MEM. I'll just copy this so I can really easily paste it into the rest of these, and then that'll be the second group. And I'll change my headline and my CTA as well, because this one has a different headline and coloration as well, actually.
And you'll notice too, as you guys filling this in, anything marked in red lets you know if there's an error. So it's nice. The feed will give you that ongoing Q&A so that you don't set something up, try to use it, and then you find out something's wrong. It'll let you know along the way if there's something that looks amiss.
Yeah, that's a good call out. And it even does this thing for things like image types and videos as well. As if you had a creative that had both, for example, in the actual template, it's only going to show you the images for image columns and videos for video columns, so you're not having to sort through a bunch of different assets for all of the different variants. So really quickly, I'll change this one to save on baking. So this one, I'll copy and paste all these different variants. And then the coloration for the actual text on these is a little bit different as well. So I will change for headline 1, it's going to stay white. And this one actually, so these ones I want to change across the board for these. Okay. And then for starting row 12, I'll change the second headline color to be the yellow color. So I'll give my hex code for that real quick. That's my yellow. And then so we have white, yellow, white. And then I'll do really just replace that one and that one. And then I can just do the yellow for the rest. Save. And that pretty much wraps up these two different variants. I'll skip the holistic achiever because I'm missing the 300 by 250 size, but it would be the exact same process where you would set up the different headline. If you have a different CTA, I'll change the CTA on this variant as well, just to show the difference there. We'll do order now instead. Save those. But yeah, same process. Change out your background images, change your headlines, change your labels, and then you'll be all done. At this point, you can even save this. This obviously wouldn't be a template. This would be a full-fledged feed, but you can save this and import it as well. This does live in the account as the, it's a cloud-based system, so you don't have to take it from one place and bring it into another. If you need it again, you just log into the account and navigate to where it lives, and you're good to go. Okay, so now that you set up the template, you set up the feed, or one person sets up the template, another person sets up the feed. The feed is also accessible to other teams, for example. So like if a copywriting team needs to come in here and make edits to a particular string of copy, a headline, whatever it may be, they're more than able to do that as well, as long as they have the proper access within the account. So it's not necessarily the case that one person is going to be doing the feed all the time. It could be, it's kind of up to your guys' discretion on that. But now that we have these both set up, we can tie them both together and get a bunch of creatives as the output. So how that works is you will navigate to wherever the template lives. You will see this little button that says use template off to the right here. Click on that. This will put you into the For Real production wizard. So when we were QAing the template before, we were clicking on preview, and it was putting into us a kind of a demonstrated production wizard view, so we can kind of test it out. But now that we're in the real deal, this is the actual production wizard. So it'll select all the 6 sizes for you from the template that you had built. And if you have statics in here as well, like I was mentioning at the very beginning, you may have, so maybe these are 6 HTML sizes that are animated. Maybe you have 6 to 10 static sizes in here as well. You can click on, so typically if you had more than one line item in here, this checkbox would select all of them. You can click on Use Templates, so this is only one, so it's not showing that is available. But you can do them all at once. So as long as, again, the naming conventions are shared between all of them, so headline 1, headline 2, A and B, and so on, you can edit them all at the same time. So you don't have to batch create a bunch of different things in a bunch of different ways. You can just do them all together. So again, hop back into here, selects the 6 sizes for us, go to next step. And now we're in Production Wizard for real. So you can individually connect content to the template, have it change across all 6 sizes, and you can do it that way if you're making very minor edits. So like if, for example, you wanted to use a different logo in all of these, and the initial logo that you made the batch with was wrong, you could just do it for one, maybe the Kroger logo with the subtext as well. You could do it that way. But the real magic of this is the connecting the feeds and the template together. So the way that you do that is you click on this little drop down that says select feed. You find the feed that you set up within the template folder. So click on that one. And now, since we named everything in the template exactly the same as what we named in the feed, and we also appended those color attributes to the text, so that headline 1A underscore color, if we click on populate from feed, it just links everything for us. So like we don't have to go through here and individually click on. So if we didn't do that, for example, I'll refresh this so I can show you guys basically the other way of doing it. I wouldn't recommend doing this other way, but it is available if you need to make individual edits or anything like that. You can click on the feed that you made, and then click on this little RSS logo, and then select from the feed what column you want to pull from. But for our purposes, since we want to save ourselves a bunch of time and not have to worry about doing that all individually, and this is a little bit error prone, to be honest. Like, you could accidentally select arrow color and it would put the arrow where the logo is supposed to be, and that's obviously not what we want. So click on populate from feed. It makes all the connections for us. And once you've done that, you'll notice these little arrows appear on the sides of your creative. There's also this drop down here, so you have 22 different versions you can just hop and skip between. But now if we flip through these, most of these will be QFC, and this is probably just because I left this particular row as white instead of changing it to blue, which we can change in a second. But you can flip through these and you'll see all the different creatives with the different logos. You can replay the animation if you want to. And then once we get to row 12, you'll notice then there's another error in the feed there. This should be white, and this should be changed, so we'll fix that as well. And then once you get to the other version, we notice that all the headline text changes in color. The background image has been replaced with this new background image. And you can cycle through all these and kind of just QA them in this way, look at them all, make sure they all look good. Find errors like I did with this, so we can go back to our feed and find those Kroger lines and just make a couple of quick edits. So we'll find this Kroger line, we'll find the CTA text color. Let's see. So let's CTA color. White. CTA text color, that should be correct. Let me see. And this is kind of the process that you'll go through when you're baking some of these out. This King's one needs to edit as well. So let's find that one. See if that one's a little bit more obvious. So yeah, this one we want to change to be white. This one, the color should be blue. This one should be white. And then I'll just copy this row for the other kings. Replace that. The Kroger one looks correct. So I'm going to batch these out and look at the actual creative output and see if I can find the source of the problem there. And we'll go from there with that one. But the rest of that looks good. Okay, so since we made a change to the feed right now, I'll exit out of this. I'll say that's okay. I'll do use template. Select the feed, populate from feed, and then just go to that King's version and make sure that looks correct. So that looks good. Color is good. The CTA shape is good. And all the versions are going to obviously inherit that change that I made to the other ones. Okay, so really the only outstanding thing here is that the Kroger version, the CTA is not showing up. But again, I'm going to batch this and we'll look at the actual creative on the other side and see if that is just a coloration issue. So we'll click on next step. This is sort of the batching process. So once you've gotten to the point of QAing everything in Production Wizard and make sure everything looks good, you can click on what destination campaign this is going to go to. So the demo campaign that we made during the last training, we'll use that. We'll just call this demo batch. Any set of creatives that comes from a template is called a batch, so you may see that term be thrown around here and there. And then the instance names, this is what each line item in the campaign is going to look like. So by default, this appends that label on the very end. So as Light and Load, Ralph's, Kroger, KFC, so on and so on. And this will be displayed on all of them, but you can change this. So you can remove things altogether. So we can just say, for example, take out display. You can just say animated banner. You can do free text. So if you wanted to say at the very beginning of this, have it say that, you could do that. And then these will all be exported with the same kind of naming convention. So we could say finish. And then this will generate all of those creatives based on the template marrying to the feed. So this, depending on how many you're making, this will take varying times, depending on what your internet speed is, all that kind of stuff. You can close this at any time. It's not going to mess up your export. They will still begin exporting. So I can come in to my demo campaign, and I'll start to see these populating. Whenever you see a folder with this kind of like stacked paper, that means this is a batch of creatives that came from a template. And there are a couple of super important things that I'll call out with the batch itself that are important to understand so you can edit these things in the most efficient ways possible. So I'll hop into here and see if they've all finished batching. You can also do some QA here with Campaign Explorer. So once you're inside the batch, you can click on Preview All. I think we looked at this last time, but just to kind of give you guys an idea, you can play the creatives. They will all animate. You can filter things. So you can, for example, just look at the 300 by 250 sizes. Apply. And then you'll see all of that 300 by 250 sizes, obviously, just to make sure everything looks correct, just to make sure that everything's coming in correct, so on and so on. You can make comments on these creatives, obviously, so if something doesn't quite look right, you can ask for an edit. You'll obviously see the different CTA messages and obviously all the logos as well. With these, I'm going to go in to find those Kroger versions and see if we can figure out what was going on with that text. More than likely, it's just something with this one does not have CTA. Let me find one of the bigger ones. And since we have so many creatives, we're on several pages within the the batch itself, so you can kind of toggle between those pages here. Hop in one of these. And then this is basically just saying, if you make an edit to this individual creative, it's going to break it from the batch. So if you make edits to the batch as a whole, which we'll look at in a second, you can leave this one as is. So your individual edits, maybe you want to make the blocks in here a different color or something, and it's just on this specific one, not for the rest of the batch. You can do that. But for this one, we're just going to check out this. This does, yep, it's just changed the color. So we'll just make an edit to the feed. See if we can find that.
We had a couple questions. I think in general, we can probably cover while we do this. So Jen, you were asking, in naming the creative instances or the individual creative variants, can you identify specific campaign and project name and number? The answer is yes. If you saw Ukiah basically hard-coded at the beginning that each of these creatives should start with Kroger Fall Creatives, I believe. So if you have the same project number that should be associated with all of the names of the creatives in that batch, you can just hard code that in and just type that in. So to help answer that. And then Justin, you're wondering in terms of the feed itself. So if you were to have the copywriters format the copy docs in an Excel feed or an Excel file, could just that data be imported into the feed within Celtra? So not the entire feed itself, not the entire CSV, but essentially just one column of values or within it. So you would be importing the entire, when you import a CVS into that content feed, you are importing the whole thing. So it's kind of dependent on you guys if you just want to essentially copy and paste that, completed copy column from your copy team into the feed, whichever is easiest for you guys. Or you if you have thoughts on what a potential other workflow might look like in terms of just essentially getting the copy columns from the copy team, but not necessarily all of the columns in there.
So is the question if you're able to basically give feed editor to someone else with a limited set of columns? Is that correct?
Yeah, Ukiah, I think the process that the copywriters go through right now is copy is input into a Word document. So this is something that we can work with Jason and Stuart to figure out what the right process is internally. But, could we see copywriters inputting copy into the feed versus a Word doc? Absolutely. But I think it's probably a discussion point internally more than it is for Celtra.
Yeah, and I would say for a case like that, I'd say a couple of ways you could do it. You could, from the very beginning, come up with your schema, label all your columns, leave everything totally blank, and then save it, download it, and just have the copywriters fill in the columns that you either leave in that ending CSV. You could just delete everything else and just give them the CSV with just the copy that you are trying to derive from them, or you could just leave everything and just ask them, fill out columns F, Q, and R, whatever it may be, and then you could get it back and then just kind of like concatenate your CSV based on what they give you. Honestly, that's kind of the point of the feed editor in general, because it's a cloud-based thing, because anybody can access it if you allow them to. I would say it's a better workflow to just like tell them which columns to edit, tell them sort of what those columns are, and have them edited directly. I think that's just a little bit more clean, a little bit more simple. But yeah, I would say it kind of depends on the workflow you guys are trying to achieve with that.
So Justin, so are you just asking if you had an Excel document that each line was the copy for each one of the versions, if you could just paste and copy it down into the feed? Is that your question?
Yeah, or Dave, it sounds like you're wondering if we can copy and paste from Word as well. If you guys want to go off mute, maybe it's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my question was simply like if we had a column in Excel and we wanted to paste, say, cells 1 through 12 from column C, could we paste that as a group of cells, or would we basically paste it into one cell and then have to do all of our duplications for the rows in the feed editor in Celtra?
Oh yeah, I feel like I've done this before, and you should be able to take something from Excel in several cells and copy it from the cell structure and paste it into cell structure in Celtra. I feel like I've done that before, and it works just fine. So you shouldn't have to like, break up any kind of content out of a single cell and populate it into all of them. That shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, and then from Dave's perspective, it sounds like, yeah, so if you had I think it's probably a discussion that, Chris and Jason can have about the process, but I think you guys are going to find it a lot easier if we all work within the feed versus the process to paste and copy things. I think what that process looks like, we can work it out, but I think at least from my standpoint, opinion of one, the process for copy, for example, paid media, we might just need to change, because I think there were even questions during the demos when we were selecting vendors, is like the hanging words and things like that, and so I think the intention was for the copywriters to work within the feed. But Jason, you can...
Yeah, that's something we're still trying to figure out internally, is how this is all going to work, and if it's going to be a dedicated person that strictly manages the feed and would coordinate between designer and copywriter, or whether it's copywriter or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of things on the table, and we're kind of working through that still right now. So I think, we want to make this as efficient and easy as possible, but we also want to make it really accurate too. So we'll talk internally and try to figure out like what makes the most sense. And there's going to be some learning that goes into this too, and trial and error, and try to figure out again what works best for us. But I think, trying to learn the best path, I think, makes a lot of sense right now. So, understanding that we can copy and paste or whatever is good. The one thing I do want to avoid is having 5 or 6 people uploading content to the feed. I think that's a recipe for disaster. So I think trying to find a way to limit the number of people who are in there, whether it's one dedicated person or just the designer and copywriter assigned to that task, I think it would be something like that.
And kind of to piggyback off of that, I think that's a really good point, that you guys have the ability to grant or limit access. Sarah's the account admin, but anybody with admin access can do this, where Basically, the level of access that you want to be able to edit the feed is the creative asset manager access. So say, for example, you just wanted, Tim, who's a copywriter, to add copy to a feed. You just give him access as a creative asset manager. He goes in and does his thing. And then when he's done, you just take that access away, and then nobody else can do it. So I do think that that's a really good point of not wanting to have too many, chefs in the kitchen building the feed, because then that could get really complicated. But you make a good point as well with there's going to be a little bit of learning. This is obviously a new tool and it's new sort of workflow for you guys. So whatever works for you, however we can help make things make sense along the way, definitely feel free to tap on us for that as well.
Yeah, and I just did a quick test just to make sure. And you can indeed, if you get an Excel with rows, you can copy that into the feed within Celtra, and same with Microsoft Word. So it's technically possible. There's no limitations in terms of copy and pasting text in between the two. But to everyone's point, it's kind of about the workflow and making sure you don't have too many chefs in the kitchen.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll hop back into this. I'm not exactly sure what's causing the Kroger text to not show up. It is white. It's probably something really dumb that I'm just not thinking of because I'm kind of on the spot here. But I'll dig into that after the fact and update you guys later. A couple of things I wanted to call out with editing this batch now are, one, at the campaign level where you see the batch folder. This gives you a direct link to the feed that these creatives are associated to. So if, for example, you wanted to do something like change, I don't know, the color block color or something like that, we could do that. I'm going to do something maybe potentially very much of an eyesore. I'm going to change all the color blocks to yellow just to use that as an example. We'll save this. When you do that, it gives a little flag saying the demo batch has been updated. It's ready to update. Go to the batch. When you make an edit to either the local version of the template or to the feed, you will get this little yellow icon up here telling you that a change has been made, and you can choose to update it. You can also choose to not update it. This little kind of like cyclical arrow, you can update it with that, or in addition to that, you can click into the batch and click on the update button. They both do the same thing. This will then update all those creatives to the yellow color blocks. We'll let that do its thing. While that's doing its thing, I will also bring up the fact that when you use a template, connect it to a feed, and create a batch, you get a local version of the template. So this is, I'll kind of go slow on this because it's a little bit confusing, and I want to make sure that it's fairly clear, and you guys feel free to tap on us again as you go to get a reminder of this. But when you do that, template plus feed equals batch, this template is completely separate from the template that we were setting up initially. And that is on purpose so that you could go into, if you click on this, this will take you to the local version of the template. So this says this creative is used as a template in a batch, and you change the name of the template will be reflected on the batch of the creatives when updating. So I'll kind of go into my original template to use this as an example. This template you'll see has the template ID ending in 125, and if I go into this template, that's not the right word, this one, we have the one ending in 73F. So that just kind of lets you know this is a completely separate entity. If you make a change to this, so I have a lot of tabs open, so I just want to make sure this is the right one. Just open it again from the batch. I'm just hopping here again. So if, for example, in this specific, and we see my disgusting yellow bars here that I did with the feed change, if you go into the local version of the template here, you can do something like, I don't know, maybe for this one we want to like put the logo up here in the corner, something like that, or maybe put this in the center. We probably would never want to do that, but just kind of as a demonstration. Click Save, and then go back to the campaign. And again, we get this little yellow dot saying that a change has been made to the batch. We can update it, so I'll click Update, click Update Batch, and then that will update those creatives. So in this instance, I just made an update to the the 300 by 250 size. That's still updating. So it will just change the 300 by 250 for this particular batch. If you made a change to this template that's in the creative assets level of the account, it will not change that batch whatsoever. This is kind of like the parent template, and the batch is kind of like the child template, but it's a different version of the template that can be edited to change all of the children inside that folder. Does that all make sense? I feel like that's, it is kind of confusing, so feel free to ask questions here if that doesn't totally make sense. Okay, cool, totally clear. So as you guys start using this stuff, definitely, again, feel free to kind of let us know if you have any questions. So there's already a batch in progress, so I'll wait for that. But you can see the change that I made on the feed has now been applied, so all the color blocks are yellow. And then we'll wait until this one's done, and we can update the 300 by 251 that has the, oh, looks like this argon got added as well. So just in the 300 by 250 for all the different variants, we have the logo that's been moved and the CTA that's been moved as well. But again, this doesn't affect the original template whatsoever. So that essentially brings us up to the end here. I know we have a little bit of extra time here. What I would say, again, highly recommend using Campaign Explorer and the comments feature, so you can kind of call out edits if you want to say this yellow looks terrible, we want to use that. You can do that and then annotate that placement within the creative so that somebody can make an edit either to the creative, to the template, or to the feed, and then those edits can be applied to the entire batch.